Do you wonder how international airlines, long depending on high-emission energy sources, are planning to address climate change? The global aviation sector is taking actions towards a more sustainable future, and it's using a groundbreaking carbon market mechanism known as CORSIA to help it get there. Welcome to Carbon Markets Now, bringing you timely discussions with key players across the carbon market landscape, exploring the policies, tools, and innovations that are shaping the future of international cooperation on climate action. My name is Kazuhisa Koakutsu, Director of Article 6 Implementation Partner Center, known as A6IP. A6IP supports countries in implementation of carbon markets under Article 6 of the Paris Agreement by building capacity, facilitating knowledge exchange, and promoting carbon markets that are more transparent, robust, and aligned with global climate goals of net zero by 2050. In this episode of Carbon Markets Now, we are zooming in on the carbon offsetting and reduction scheme for international aviation, or known as CORSIA. Joining us today are Roemia Ramirez Baragas, or Ro, Director of Transport at the Environmental Defense Fund, EDF, and Abhijit Amberi Premanat, or Avi, Assistant Manager for Climate Policy at the International Air Transport Association, IATA, both deeply engaged with the global transportation industry and its path to decarbonization. So, welcome you both, Lo and Avi. So first, we will unpack key aspects of CORSIA, then spotlight the perspectives and initiatives of our guests. So why CORSIA important, and why are we addressing it in this episode? CORSIA is one of the key measures adopted by the International Civil Aviation Organization, or ICAO. It represents an effort from the international aviation sector to strengthen its carbon emissions reductions by utilizing a global market-based measure. Under CORSIA, airlines monitor and report their international flight emissions. For emissions that exceed a set of baseline, airlines must purchase eligible carbon credits to offset that growth. CORSIA is designed to deliver carbon-neutral growth for international aviation from 2021 onward, complementing other measures such as improved aircraft technology, operational efficiencies, and use of sustainable aviation fuels, SAFs. Participation is voluntary during the pilot phase and the first phase until 2026, but from 2027, this scheme becomes mandatory for most countries, making it one of the largest climate action mechanisms in the world. Through the use of market mechanisms, CORSIA is closely connected to Article 6 of the Paris Agreement and represents one of the largest potential sources of demand for the international carbon market. The connection underscores the importance of robust rules and practices to ensure environmental integrity and avoiding double counting, in line with the accounting guidance of the Article 6.2, known as Article 6.2 guidance. And here to help us break down the details behind these crucial mechanisms are our guests. So first, set of questions. This is about the big picture. So first, Lo, you've been closely tracking the program. What is EDF's assessment of CORSIA's effectiveness in driving real emission reductions to date? And what are the key areas that ensure environmental integrity in its implementation? So Lo, please.
Thank you, Kazu. And hi, Abby. It's good to see you again. And thank you to A6IP for inviting us to join this episode of Carbon Markets Now to discuss this very important topic. We're delighted to support A6IP's critical work to build the necessary capacity and knowledge that will help ensure a robust implementation of international carbon markets, and in particular, Article 6 of the Paris Agreement. So the Environmental Defense Fund has worked with other civil societies partners through the International Coalition for Sustainable Aviation, ICSA, with governments and with the international aviation sector, including IATA, to help shape a well-designed global market-based measure that would help airlines slow or reduce their rising climate impacts. That's how we got CORSIA in 2016. And this is the world's first sector-specific global carbon emissions reductions and offset program, as you mentioned. It caps emissions from international flights at a certain level, and participating airlines are required to offset any growth above a baseline by either using CORSIA eligible units or CORSIA eligible fuels. We're just now entering CORSIA's first effective phase. When CORSIA was approved, it was decided that it would be implemented in 3 phases, as you mentioned, the pilot, the first and the second phase. This pilot and first phase are voluntary, but starting in 2027, CORSIA will be mandatory for states with the largest aviation footprint. Now, the impact of COVID-19 on the aviation sector really limited any emissions reductions effectiveness from CORSIA, as airline emissions were well below the emergency baseline agreed by ICAO, which was mid-2020. However, during phase 1, with the newly adjusted baseline, which is about 15% below 2019 emissions, and Abby, you can correct me, we are due to the industry, and due to the industry's quick recovery, we will finally see the first offsetting requirements at the end of 2027. Not a significant amount, but certainly a first step. Now, CORSIA's framework has the potential to prevent up to 1.5 billion tons of CO2 emissions by 2035. And with the right adjustments to CORSIA, it could achieve even more. But in many ways, Kazu, I want to say, CORSIA's contribution so far has been on the broader carbon markets and not just aviation. For example, ICAO made some key decisions on CORSIA implementation before Glasgow's Article 6 decisions, and many of those shaped the conversation and the biggest issues of Article 6. And, we were there. In addition, CORSIA is the first carbon market to implement the avoidance of double counting criteria. And now all CORSIA eligible programs have put in place procedures to verify that corresponding adjustments have been made, or in some cases that those units, those relevant CORSIA eligible units, will have a guarantee by the program of that corresponding adjustment. So that's a pretty big influence and assessment of progress by CORSIA. Nevertheless, while CORSIA has been considered the gold standard for high-quality carbon credits, in an ever-evolving, complex world, which is carbon markets, there is still always much to do to ensure its environmental integrity of the CORSIA emissions unit criteria and its MRV system.
Thank you, Ro, for setting the scene on CORSIA's role in addressing climate change and its impact. And yeah, I do also know that actually CORSIA's main decisions also comes before the Glasgow, which kind of set kind of stepping stones to really start the high environmental integrity carbon credit to start. So I really see the role of CORSIA really bringing this global carbon market leading. So Abby, turning to the airline industry's perspectives, IATA has a long-term goal for the global airline industry to achieve net zero carbon emissions by 2050. How does CORSIA fit into the broader decarbonization strategy of the aviation industry? And what is its expected contribution compared to other measures like sustainable aviation fuels and technological improvements? Abby, please.
Yes, thank you very much, Kazu-san. And let me start with expressing warm gratitude for the invitation to this very important episode on CORSIA to A6IP. We have been collaborating for many years, not only with you but also with Ro in different platforms. So it's these are collaborations that we very much appreciate, and thank you again for the invite. I think I have to draw a lot from your introduction and Ro's answer already, where we have started. But it is true that the industry has come together and committed to achieving net zero CO2 emissions in 2050. And this happened in 2021 in IATA's annual general meeting. And then the next year, this decision was reflected on the member state side of ICAO, where the LTAG was achieved. And these are two very big achievements. And have huge impacts in the aviation sector, and we are committed to this ambition overall. We do see CORSIA as an important part of that basket of measures to achieve net zero emissions in 2050. But as you pointed out, CORSIA is not meant for that per se. It is meant for carbon neutral growth of aviation. Based against a baseline year, which for us is 85% of 2019 emissions. You have both been very instrumental to get it going on both the ICAO side and also the UNFCCC side to ensure that the guidelines are there, the integrity is there, and the industry depends on these high integrities that is set on both the UNFCCC side and the ICAO side. And we also very much benefit from the fact that when it becomes more stringent on the UNFCCC side, it's always reflected on the CORSIA side. So we very much trust the processes of both ICAO and UNFCCC when it comes to the integrity of these credits itself. As for how much CORSIA can decarbonize itself, Ro has pointed out that until 2035, when the scheme is currently expected to expire, 1.5 to 2 billion tons of CO2 emission reductions can be achieved through CORSIA. And this is depending on how the scheme has been set. If you just look at the first phase of CORSIA from 2024 to 2026, and as Ro has already pointed out, the first offsetting requirements under CORSIA is expected from 2024. We have just finished our latest analysis, and we think that between 146 and 236 million tons of CO2 in just 3 years can be reduced through CORSIA. And this is demand that's predictable. It's demand that will increase with time, especially from the second phase of CORSIA onwards from 2027, when equally important big economies will join CORSIA, like those of Brazil, China, and India. So the demand for offsetting requirements from the industry is only going to increase, and this is going to translate into demand for CORSIA eligible emission units. So for this session, maybe we just call it CORSIA units or credits or something like that, so that it's easier. But yes, CORSIA does have an important role to play in aviation decarbonization, not only for 2050, but also in the years leading up to it. And beyond 2035 itself, not to prejudge the fate of CORSIA, I think important discussions will have to happen in the year 2032, when there will be a periodic review of CORSIA that will determine its fate. And the evolution of the scheme will be based on the state of the world, where it is on its decarbonization path as a whole, and also if there will be supply of certain kinds of carbon offsets and so on. So we're looking forward to those discussions. But at the moment, we are approaching this phase of CORSIA with a lot of positivity to make sure that there will be enough credits for airlines to comply with their requirements. Yeah.
So thank you very much, both Ro and Avi, to provide a kind of big picture, and we understand that CORSIA is also the one of the approaches that aviation industry try to achieve decarbonization pathways. But at the same time, now we are in the phase 1, and also the phase 2, we have also compliance. Market is also emerging, so we see a bigger role of these CORSIA to take place. So now I also like to move on to more Article 6 focus discussions, especially the links between CORSIA and Article 6 of the Paris Agreement. So Avi, in terms of the supply of CORSIA eligible emission units, which you also a little bit touch upon, what is IATA's outlook on the availability of Article 6 compliant credit? And what is the industry doing to encourage host countries to issue them?
Thank you very much, Kazu-san. So I think we have good news and bad news. So if we just look at the first phase of CORSIA, we are tracking host countries, the kind of projects that they have, and so on. So we have like kind of like a database within IATA where we're looking at the expected supply of CORSIA units for the first phase. And the good news is that we think there will be enough sufficient volume to create a market for CORSIA eligible units for the first phase. At the moment, there is only one project from Guyana that's supplying into this market. That number has to increase because CORSIA is a market-based measure, and if airlines are not able to exercise the discretion as a market, and if let's say we have to buy 100 units and there's 100 units, then there is no market there, right? So we need to enable that market, and to enable that market, we need liquidity. So the good news is it looks like when you're looking at all of the carbon offset projects that are out there in the world, and when you apply the methodologies, the exclusions of the methodologies under ICAO CORSIA's emissions units criteria and eligible programs and so on, it looks like there will be sufficient units to create a market for the first phase when you just look at from 24 to 26. The bad side of the story is that there is still a huge bottleneck to achieve that liquidity are the requirements under the Article 6 of the Paris Agreement, which we have to abide by for accounting and the requirement to avoid double counting of the same emission reductions. But then there are a few administrative decisions that have to be made. The issuance of the letters of authorization is probably right now the biggest bottleneck from liquidity in the market coming through. So IATA is engaging with host countries directly a lot. We are working to create awareness in platforms like this with a lot of stakeholders, including the carbon markets. IATA, for example, we're working closely with A6IP and other players in the carbon market, apart from host countries directly who have the capacity and Article 6 readiness to issue these letters of authorizations towards units that can be used by aircraft operators under CORSIA. I think I will touch upon this a little bit later, but for now, I'll hand it back to you, Kazu-san.
Okay, thank you. So there's much potential for the supply, and we already kind of know that. But also the Article 6 is a kind of important area which we need to tackle in order to provide authorized units. So yeah, thank you so much. So now, Lo, what are the most significant remaining challenges in ensuring that credits under CORSIA compliance meet these highest environmental integrity standards and align Article 6? So if you could elaborate more on that.
Sure. And thanks, Kazu. And I mean, thanks, Abby, for sharing your IATA's views and outlook on this very critical issue, right? I certainly partially agree with the supply challenge. But I mean, this conversation, Abby and I have been having this conversation for a long time. I believe this is a temporal and resolvable challenge. So very happy to hear some of the positive aspects, Abby, that you raised. And yeah, we're looking very closely to this because, ICAO has approved 6 programs and conditionally approved 5 more as eligible to issue these units in the first phase. And for clarification, conditionally approved means that these programs just need to make some fixes, and then they will achieve full CORSIA eligibility once they do those updates. And that will significantly increase the amount of credits with the potential to become available in this supply, right? But the biggest question is the authorization attestation issue. But I think there's still enough time to allow for the market to adjust accordingly. This is not to minimize the supply concern, but with some time still available, we really believe compliance will be required by 2027. I always forget the exact time in 2027. Maybe Abby, you can remind us. But there's still time for us to fulfill the necessary demand, which again is not extraordinarily high for this first phase. And looking further into phase two, we can't forget the potential role that authorized A64 units will play in providing an additional wave of supply beyond what's currently CORSIA eligible programs. So, and these CORSIA eligible programs are all rooted in the voluntary carbon market phase, very different from what Article 6.4 mechanism will be. So, and I'll elaborate on the 6.4 question later, not question or issue later. But I want to highlight, the three remaining challenges, or I see that we're facing to ensure the highest environmental integrity for CORSIA eligible units and alignment with Article 6. First, the biggest challenge, and so what some analyses have called the authorization bottleneck. I was happy for Abby to mention the word. I believe Guyana has been the only country to have issued CORSIA eligible units, and with a proper attestation or letter of authorization, and it's about 15.8 million credits. That's still well below, as Abby said, to meet the demand for this first phase. But according to A6IP 2024 Article 6 implementation status report, there's around 70 countries that are in progress or have or are in progress of putting in place such arrangements. I'm very hopeful that A6IP's next report, which comes out pretty soon, Kazu, I don't want to put you in the spot, but that I hope it brings some positive news. So that plus a quick operationalization of Article 6.4 should help the market mature quickly. So that's the first challenge. Now, once this countries have attestation and authorization procedures in place, the supply issue should be resolved. The second challenge, and following this swift development of the authorization procedures, the most important issue next to ensure high integrity in CORSIA and Article 6 is to ensure countries have a robust tracking and reporting arrangements. Let's not forget, this is just as important as authorization procedures, because this is the only way we can keep track of one of the most important aspects of the post-Paris Agreement carbon markets, the avoidance of double counting by both airlines and governments. And then I would say the third issue or challenge that, to keep this high integrity of CORSIA is to ensure that the ICAO emission unit criteria, which is our criteria, to keep that high integrity, is continuously maintained and updated so that it tracks Article 6 developments and broader carbon markets best practices, so we can have a science-based principles and the highest quality of credits moving forward.
Thank you, Ro. I think this you were mentioning about the authorization is really key critical area where we as A6IP also see a very importance of connecting this authorization towards NDC or authorization towards CORSIA or for any other purposes. And we are also about to launch the 2025 edition of this Article 6 implementation status report in this month, October. So please stay tuned. And we also see more countries than last year are now engaging and progressing. And we will provide more detailed analysis on those. But again, very much also related to registry tracking for these purposes, when the first transfer happens, and all these are very important elements of this integrity. So yeah, you are rightly mentioned like this is temporable and also resolvable. I also agree with that. I think we are really collectively kind of create a robust institutional arrangements for authorization, including tracking and reporting by the host country. I think it is very durable to really deliver more authorized units, which are much more integrated with the emission unit criteria as well as Article 6 rules. So let's hope that we can bring more tangible outcome. So thank you very much for both to really addressing the key issues around CORSIA and the Article 6. So next segment, I also wanted to touch upon your initiatives and your organizations leading on the ground. So, Avi, what are some of the key emerging on-the-ground initiatives or projects that IATA and its members are undertaking to reduce emissions, and how those efforts being integrated with or supported by market-based mechanisms? So, Avi, over to you.
Thank you, Kazu-san. Maybe just to, I know that we have gone to the next segment, but let me just start with appreciating Ro for identifying those three challenges. This is also something that we have recognized, and we want to collaborate with all stakeholders to ensure that these CORSIA units are of the highest environmental integrity. And if this means going to host countries and letting them know how these reporting and tracking facilities and so on work, we are very much interested to collaborate on this process. So with you both and anybody who can help with that. So uh, we want units of the highest integrity. We cannot, be exposed to a situation where, let's say, we have some kind of units coming through, and then later on finding out that maybe they're not of the integrity that that is required for that phase and so on. It's a risk that we don't want to be exposed to. As for your question itself, yes, CORSIA is one of the decarbonization levers, market-based measures, which it falls under. The industry is always engaged with other decarbonization levers, which are more in-sector in nature, that either increase the operational efficiency of transport, or it reduces the energy use itself, so that with more renewable sources, so that you consume lesser fossil fuel, and therefore you emit lesser CO2 emissions. And at the moment, this has been happening through two main levers. One is fleet renewals. And fleet renewal is probably one of the most attractive options for airlines at the moment, because not only does it reduce your emissions in flight, but it also gives a better customer experience. When they hop onto a new aircraft, they like it. And they would, I mean, if they had to make a choice between, I don't know, like a 30-year-old aircraft by some airline and a new one, of course, they will choose a new one. So it's a solution that ticks two boxes at once, and airlines are engaging in this a lot. And the second one is something that is very famous right now, which is sustainable aviation fuels. I'll call it SAF going forward. And SAF is a readily available drop-in solution for airlines to reduce their in-sector emissions. There are some issues with SAF, in the sense that we don't have enough of it. We want to see more of it. But airlines, regardless of uncertainties with respect to its production and so on, are still engaging a lot in SAF uplift. And given that we have so many more jurisdictions around the world where you have new SAF policies, including in Asia Pacific, in Europe, in Americas, and so on, we should expect that there'll be a lot more SAF production, and that airlines will be able to benefit from these produced SAF and use it on their flights. Airlines are also engaged on almost in-flight operational efficiency measures. Something that is not entirely new, but very novel, is this technology called AeroShark, where basically it's a transparent film that airlines can apply on their aircraft, and that it actually reduces fuel consumption by up to 2% for a single flight, which is and therefore reduces the CO2 emissions of these flights. And from IATA's point of view, all decarbonization levers are equally important. Every ton of CO2 reduced is equally important, either through these in-sector measures, operational efficiency measures, or through the use of SAF, or fleet renewal to next generation aircraft, or when the time is right, probably around early 2030s or mid 2030s, we might even um, be able to benefit from technological advancements to new propulsion technologies that might be of hydrogen or electric propulsion technologies in nature. And we're very excited for that opportunity. And a lot of our airlines are already engaged in that, investing into some of these firms and so on. And the but I must highlight that CORSIA does have space to encourage the use of SAF within the scheme. And this is something that we are very excited about, because although it's not an incentive per se, airlines are basically able to claim what they are paying for. And therefore, it reduces their offsetting requirements on international routes that fall within CORSIA. And we think this is an important impetus also for airlines that are operating on international routes to use a lot of SAF. But ultimately, I just have to also point out that any emission reductions, any ton of CO2 reduced is a good ton of CO2 reduced, and we will support all of these measures.
Thank you, Avi, to share many initiatives that the aviation industry is undertaking. And the word SAF becomes quite common nowadays. We hear many words also from TV commercials, and some aviation industries also pronouncing things, announces. So I like to see much more those actions taking place on the ground. And thank you so much for sharing those actions and also examples from industries. So, Lo, what are some of the relevant discussions in the broader carbon market world that EDF is paying close attention to, and how could that impact CORSIA? So this is a question to Lo.
Okay, thanks, Kazu. And I mean, before I go into that question, I'll just say EDF does a lot of work on, high integrity SAF. So not a topic for today, and not a topic for me. I have colleagues who are way more experts than me on our work there. So I just want to say, we're very involved. We're working with member states and industry on ensuring like highest integrity of SAF. Yes, and then on this question, EDF has a very experienced carbon markets team, and they engage regularly on multiple fora, covering both voluntary and compliance markets. And as it relates to CORSIA, there's some issues that we're paying close attention to because of their direct or indirect influences or impact on it could have on CORSIA. So I'll mention just a couple of them very briefly, and I apologize if I get too much into weeds. I'll try not to. But something that's subject as a topic, a subject, but an integral part of the high integrity jurisdictional RED plus units conversations that's happening. Methodologies to quantify jurisdictional scale high forest, low deforestation credits, or I'll just call them HFLD. I flagged this issue because even if its potential to impact CORSIA is, I think indirectly and low, because ICAO has settled its eligibility of high integrity jurisdictional RED plus units. HFLD credits, reward jurisdictions for resisting drivers of deforestation and protecting high forest carbon sinks. And these credits represent emissions reductions because they are issued through conservative quantification of the emissions that would have occurred in the absence of ongoing interventions. So over the next few months, I know there's multiple fora considering these credits, like ICVCM and even Singapore, a big carbon market player. And so how they treat HFLD methodologies it's something that we're looking into. These discussions are independent from each other, right? And no, they don't depend on each other, but these conversations tend to influence each other, because in the carbon market world, we're always looking to see what is the best practice, what is the best way forward. So that's one of the topics that we're following, and I could go more into why HFLD methodologies and credits are important, but I'll hold that for a more deeper conversation in the future we might have on this topic. So Another topic that we're closely watching, this is more in the connection of Article 6 and CORSIA. It's the operationalization of Article 6.4, right? As you may be aware, ICAO's Assembly Resolution 39A393 notes that the units generated from those mechanisms under the UNFCCC and the Paris Agreement would be eligible for CORSIA, for using CORSIA, provided that they align with ICAO's emission unit criteria, including on avoidance of double counting and the eligible vintage and time frame. So as we see the progress on the operationalization of Article 6.4, we're hoping, for conversations between Council TAB and the evaluation of the Article 6.4 mechanism to see and confirm which projects and which units from Article 6.4, those that are authorized for OIM's other international mitigation purposes, that could become CORSIA eligible. And we're very, very focused on that. And last but not least, for sure, another conversation that we're following in multiple fora is the treatment of removals, right? So we certainly welcome the credits or units that come from high integrity removal projects. But the emphasis here is high integrity, right? So this means that these removal projects must ensure permanence, environmental integrity, and be implemented in under a conservative baseline. And not all removal projects are the same. So we must take into account some of the persistent problems with reversals and even carbon leakage, as it could happen with, for example, removal projects based on enhanced oil recovery. So we're paying close attention to that conversation and engaging with our partners to make sure we have the highest integrity for any removal projects units. Thanks.
Thank you, Raul, to bring up those very important points, which EDF is also currently watching out. And those are definitely something many international communities are looking at, especially in this carbon market field. So I think jurisdictional red is also something providing a very good examples, taking into account those conservativeness. Again, those conservative baseline is also articulated in the Article 6.2. And so that's definitely aligning with the Article 6 rules. At the same time, also, 6.4 mechanism, now being the order methodology standard we adopted by last COP29. So we see already 6.4, now known as a PACM, Paris Agreement Creating Mechanism, is now being operationalized. I do also know that there is also discussions around how to address non-permanence, especially for removals. But I think basic principle was already adopted. We are ready to get into more details in terms of how we can practically implement by addressing those issues while ensuring environmental integrity. So yeah, thank you for that, pointing out these important aspects of the carbon market right now. Okay, so I just move on to the last set of questions, which is about the broader perspective and future outlook. So let's try to zoom out and look ahead to the next phase of aviation's climate journey towards net zero. So looking ahead to the next phase of CORSIA and the future of aviation decarbonization, we talk about phase 1 and phase 2, and even maybe beyond. What roles do you see for other market-based mechanisms like domestic, or now we have also regional emission trading systems, and how can they be designed to complement CORSIA and avoid creating a fragmented global system? So I'd like to hear your views on this.
Yes. Thanks, Kazu. It's always important to be looking forward, right? Like, we're doing a lot of work now, but we have to, be prepared for how improve the effectiveness of measures like CORSIA. So, taking into account the three main challenges I is mentioned before, right? That so we ensure environmental integrity of CORSIA and their units. And with the understanding that those have been addressed, I think the next phase of CORSIA would be for ICAO to begin to adapt it to what Abby said, so that the aviation sector can achieve its long-term goal of net zero climate impact by 2050. Because this CORSIA is slated to end in 2035, but I think since then ICAO adopted its long-term aspirational goal, and CORSIA will likely have a role to play post 2035. So for this to happen, ICAO needs to align CORSIA's ambition beyond 2035 and align it with a net zero carbon 2050 goal. This requires establishing a meaningful trajectory with an aviation carbon budget that's compatible with the Paris Agreement temperature goal and integrating sustainable aviation fuel in accordance with the ICAO global framework for cleaner aviation fuels, which, CAF3 is the how we call that. ICAO also needs to expand its focus to encompass the full spectrum of aviation's climate impacts. So here we're talking about addressing non-CO2 emissions, so it can deliver necessary air quality and public health benefits in addition to emission reductions. And lastly, CORSIA needs to generate an effective price signal to inform mitigation strategies across the entire basket of measures. So like Adi was saying, it's not just every emission reduction is welcome, it's important. This includes aircraft technologies, operations, fuels, and of course offsets. Now, second part of your question is a bit more complex. The hope of a global market measure like CORSIA is so we avoid duplicative or conflicting regional or domestic regulation on a global industry. And I'm pretty sure Abby will agree with that. However, whether regional or domestic emissions trading schemes could play a role in accelerating decarbonization efforts in the aviation sector really depends on the design of those tools. So, if it's well designed, could help. If it's not, it could actually delay. Now, if CORSIA is not constantly evaluated and adjusted to align with ICAO's broader net zero 2050 goal and to address aviation's broader climate impacts, then I would say there could be a role for regional and domestic measures, not just schemes, but measures, to help place the sector on a pathway to reduce its emissions and make the business case for cleaner technologies. And this is even recognized already by ICAO's, framework for SAF, LCAF, and other aviation cleaner technologies, the CAF3 outcome I was just mentioning, because that framework supports states in their planning, development, and implementation of national or regional policies that accelerate the sector decarbonization efforts. So it's something that ICAO recognizes these as complementary action to CORSIA. A great example for this, the EU Refuel EU aviation regulation, right? Which with this SAF uptake requirements. So I'll leave it at that, but certainly something to keep a close eye on. Thanks.
Thank you for sharing those broader outlook. And I completely agree that this international carbon market, including CORSIA, should really align with net zero goal. And that definitely implies that we really need to go beyond 2032 phase 2, because that is our ultimate goal. So not only just Paris Agreement, but also CORSIA, maybe many other corporate net zero target really need to align with net zero. At the same time, as you rightly mentioned, maybe some regional approach, those one could be also complement to each other. So yeah, let's hope that maybe beyond 2032 outlooks like has much more kind of a synergetic way to really make our net zero drive by the aviation sector. So Abby, last but not least, maybe from the airline industry's perspectives, what are the most important policy developments that IATA would like to see from the governments and international bodies to provide the necessary certainty for airlines to invest in decarbonization? So Abby, please.
Yes, thank you, Kazusan. If you give me a wish list, I might need more than an hour to go through it. But I think um, it's useful to start this outlook for the future from the aviation industry's point of view by looking at it a little bit in the past. And as we have all identified here, I just want to also again highlight that Corsia has been a long time building. It was all the way, I think, back in like 2008 or so on when this idea came along, and it was put together, came together in 2016. It was uh, thanks to people like Ro who were sitting in those technical meetings, actually writing these things down. And it was thanks to people like you, Kazuzan and Ro, who were at COP29, running around and trying to get the guidelines towards Article 6 done. So I think when we look back, we've come a long way in establishing the first global market-based measure for a sector that is aligned with the strictest criteria at the moment, with the addition that this criteria is also dynamic, that it gets stricter with time, and it adapts to the latest scientific findings and so on. So we are in full support of this mechanism, and our biggest ask for states right now is to implement CORSIA. More states participate in CORSIA, and for states to implement CORSIA in its entirety according to the CORSIA SARs. In fact, I would also like to share good news, at least from our point of view, that we have shared a paper on these lines in the ongoing assembly, 42nd session of the ICAO assembly, which has received widespread positive feedback from member states. So there is recognition that we need to get CORSIA up and running. We have achieved this thing. We've put it together. Everything is in place. All we need now is to show host countries that there is this very determinable demand from aircraft operators under CORSIA for Article 6 credits. In fact, we have run some analysis to see that in the foreseeable future, CORSIA will be probably the majority of the demand for Article 6 credits. I don't know. We can see if I'm wrong a little, but it's at least 200 million tons in the first phase, and that number is only going to increase in the second phase. So host countries should see this as an opportunity, and we hope that seeing this demand, they will put in place the right kind of authorization frameworks and the administrative processes and so on, so that letters of authorization are issued towards these credits. And as Ro has rightly pointed out, they also have to put in place the required reporting and tracking mechanisms to ensure that no double counting of the same emission reductions happen. Um, with that being said, we are also, like I told in my previous response, exposed to a lot of SAF policies. Um, and ICAO has had a very important role to play in this, especially following the CAF3 conference on aviation clean energy fuels, um, and the global framework that has followed it, which is also discussed in the assembly just last week. We support it. But with the recognition that these policies also have to support the production of SAF. So we have, for example, in Europe, Refuel EU, which is a supply mandate, but that supply mandate, we have noted, is creating a few maybe unintended consequences. And we have identified this. So we're going back to the European authorities to tell them, well, did you think about this when you wrote this policy? So there are always possibilities to make it better. So as an end user of the SAF, as an industry who's ultimately having to decarbonize, being exposed to these policies, we have the opportunity to go back to lawmakers and try to improve the existing SAF policies. And we're engaging with countries where SAF policies are expected to also at the policy conception stage itself with these learnings to see how maybe we can try to really put a framework together, not only to provide a demand signal for SAF, but also to create the right kind of SAF support policies so that production of SAF itself can increase. Yeah, I think I'll stop it at that. But with very, very positive approach to the CORSIA space. We want to see it succeed. And as Ro pointed out, its evolution beyond 2035 will depend on its success today. And we do not want to see a patchwork of market-based mechanisms, be it cap and trade mechanisms and so on. And we want to see CORSIA succeed so that we can avoid that patchwork of mechanisms. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Avi, for also sharing your broader outlook and expectation from the aviation industry. So, yeah, again, I'd like to thank you both, Lo and Avi, for sharing your valuable insights into this both supply and demand side of carbon market integrity. Just some of the key takeaways is that I also see CORSIA is a really leading, really global, as well as a sector more based, like aviation sector, mechanism driving the industry towards net zero goal. And I think I also respect the CORSIA because they are kind of starting again from the scratch, from idea, as Avi you mentioned, but at the same time, building on the rules with much more high integrity, and also started this journey towards net zero. So from this point of view, I also see three key takeaways, at least from my point of view. One is that, as Avi also mentioned, that there is a huge potential. Already many methodologies be eligible, emission unit criteria being defined, and there's a huge potential to really tap on those mitigation by the aviation industry. At the same time, I think the second key takeaway is that Article 6 is also the key to ensure high environment integrity. And this is where the authorization or tracking, reporting, attestations to really make sure avoidance double counting. This is a really key areas to ensure. And again, with the outcome from COP29, we already have all the rules being now taking place. So all the CORSIA rules, now Paris Agreement, Article 6 rules. So it's really, us to deliver. It's really the time for our action. The last point I also find is very interesting was this is really opportunities for not only aviation industry, but also many host countries looking at NDC enhancement, especially this year in 2025. All the countries are looking for more ambition. But for this ambition to happen, we need more finance, we need more investment. And I see this CORSIA is one very important opportunities to bring more finance into the country so that they can, benefit to bring more actions on the ground. And I think this is really key areas. And with the phase one, now it's 2025, and then one more years, and then we have a phase two. I think really it is really a right time to bring our actions into more high emissions. So I hope I take up some of the key items from the conversation, but I do really appreciate all the points that you shared with us. And to learn more about A6IP, EDF, and IATA, please click the links in the comment section. And if you enjoy this episode, please like and subscribe to Carbon Markets Now, and follow A6IP for more insights into the evolving world of international carbon markets. And again, I thank you to both Lo and Avi to join in this conversation. I think we really captured quite many important points of CORSIA and also way forward, and also what we need to do right now. So with that note, I really thank you to both, and thank you so much for joining this episode. We'll now share some of the latest updates on Article 6 and carbon markets. An increasing number of countries are submitting initial reports to the UNFCCC. Recently, Palau, Malawi, and the Maldives have had their initial reports appear in the centralized accounting and reporting platform. Zimbabwe has submitted its regular information to the UNFCCC and has become the first country to have regular information visible in the CARB. Thailand updated its carbon market regulations with the release of the International Carbon Credit Guideline. The Article 6.4 supervisory body adopted the standard addressing suppressed demand in mechanism methodologies during its 17th meeting this past August. Additional bilateral cooperation is emerging under Article 6.2. Singapore signed new bilateral cooperation agreements separately with both Thailand and Vietnam, while India and Japan signed a memorandum of cooperation on the joint crediting mechanism. In voluntary carbon market news, ICVCM approved 3 biochar methodologies from CAR, Isometric, and Vera, as well as 2 improved forest management methodologies from ACR and Vera. Additionally, VCMI has updated the Carbon Market Access Toolkit to provide guidance to governments in emerging economies.